welcome to the Deck Tech. We have Steven here. And Steven, what are you playing today?
I'm playing Cheerios.
Awesome. So that's a deck that's been really popular. I know Caleb Durwood, who is a very popular streamer, has been streaming it a lot lately, and it can be pretty explosive. So do you play a pretty typical build of Cheerios?
Yes. I used to play Cheerios before SRAM was released.
Yeah.
And so with the release of SRAM, it makes him
So you're like an old school Cheerios player. Yeah. So you're used to this type of deck and these types of matchups.
Yeah, it was a lot grindier, more storm centric.
Yeah, absolutely. So these two cards, these are the main important pieces of the deck, correct?
They are the engine that lets the deck actually run. It plays a lot of bad cards and then some really good cards.
Yeah, out of curiosity, which of these would you rather have if you got to choose the Paladin or the SRAM?
It's really situational. The Paladin is great because it's optional, but the SRAM lets you get the draw on cast, so even if they have a response to remove, you at least get that first draw.
I do have to ask, do you ever get worried about decking yourself? Like, is there ever a point when you're close?
No, actually, my sideboard plans actually want me to deck myself.
Oh, see, okay, so we'll get there. We will get there, don't worry. Okay, perfect. And so a quarter shield kind of starts a trend that we're going to see with this deck, correct?
Yes. A lot of these 4 of 0 drop artifact equipments that really don't do a lot. This could be completely blank. As long as it says equipment and has 0 mana, that's all the deck needs.
That's what we want, right?
Yep.
So if we're looking at the next slide, we're probably going to see a lot more of the similar cards.
Yes. Yep.
What do you think about Paradise Mantle? I feel like that one actually is one of the more helpful of the 0 drop artifacts.
Yes. If I can't get one of the upcoming cards to produce some mana, then Paradise Mantle lets me use my Puresteel Paladin or SRAM to actually generate the mana I need.
Right, absolutely. Perfect. So this one, have you ever even used the ability on this?
Yes, I actually have had Desperation charge counters put on a Sigil of Distinction.
Did you win that game?
Yes.
Oh!
Actually did, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yep. Okay, so that's awesome. So you heard it here. This card is going to go up. This is a good card.
It's actually used to be less, but then it went up because it has that potential to just be a fallback plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And then looking at the next cards that are coming up.
Yep, so we have more 0 drops that are equipment that draws cards with SRAM.
Have you ever, what's the most that you've ever equipped on like a single creature?
Well, just earlier today I equipped close to 16 equipments onto a single Paladin. And I had to pass the turn, but I was able to win the next turn. So
right, yeah. With that, I mean, so what's the toughness, or what's the? Do you know what the power was, or was it just kind
so
of like
it was a 424.
424.
So, yeah.
You're not getting through that.
No.
You're not getting through
reach,
that.
vigilance.
Reach, vigilance,
yep,
anything.
all those.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, moving forward, we're gonna look probably. Okay, so these are the spells of the deck.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about them.
So before SRAM was released, these cards didn't exist. They were Gataxian Probe, Street Wraith, things that would cycle the deck so that you could, mulligan a little less but still dig to get your combo. These help us with the advent of SRAM. Serum Visions gives us a little bit of dig room since we can keep those non-combo hands but still draw into our combo. Swan Song gives it a little bit of protection, and Noxious Revival gives recursion for a lot of different things. Yeah,
I know we were talking earlier. You said the Swan Song used to be the 0 mana counterspell.
Yeah, Swan Song used to be Pact of Negation.
Pact of Negation, yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then Swan Song just turns out to be a little bit better. It's not 0 mana, so I do have to have mana if I'm going to use it as backup, but then I don't have to worry about losing the game if I can't pay 5 next turn. Right,
that's a lot. That's a lot, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. And what do you use Noxious Revival for?
So if I've cycled through the deck and they've made me discard a crucial piece, I can put it back on the top and use those 0 mana artifacts to draw again.
Right.
If they've made, if they've killed off a SRAM and I need to, draw those extra cards, I can put him back on top, draw it out, and try again next turn. Yeah. So
would you say it's like a good against removal? That's kind of part of
it. Yeah, it's great against removal and also hand disruption in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving forward, we're looking at these 2 cards.
Okay, so these are the most powerful cards in the actual deck. Retract doesn't really look like a lot, but it lets you bring all those 0 mana artifacts back into your hand, including Mox Opal, which will tap for mana again. So you'll pretty much just be cycling through all of these equipments and drawing all of these cards. You'll hit retracts, pick them back up, you put them back down, generate a huge storm count, and then finish them off with this great shot.
So as we've seen a few Cheerios players last round, but they didn't get to really do. So this is actually how the deck wins. You don't attack with your 3-power creature. You're going to grape shot them. Yep. What happens if your retract gets countered?
So if the retract gets countered, it's not that big of a deal. Most of the time you just go to equip them up.
Yeah.
You start trying to plan for the next turn, and then the deck runs a couple of sideboard cards for the matchups that are going to try and counter your stuff.
Right, absolutely. So before we move on to sideboard, I want to ask, what do you think that this deck is really good against?
The deck?
What do you sit down and you're just so happy that you see?
Oh, if I see Infect or Tron, pretty much any of the faster, trying to outrace you combo-y creature combo decks, those decks just lay down. They can't really interact with you. They don't have the appropriate removal spells or the counter spells. When they do have it, it doesn't matter because the deck just goes off turn 2 or turn 3. Yeah,
absolutely. So what deck do you hate seeing on the other side?
Oh, I can't stand Grixis. If I see a Grixis deck, Jund deck, anything with heavy spot removal and hand disruption, then the deck sometimes just lays down.
Yeah, we did see Cheerios versus green-black, and the removal spells with the hand disruption just was a little bit too much for the Cheerios player to overcome. Yeah. So definitely, absolutely.
So turn 1 Thoughtseize into turn 2 Abrupt Decay just makes SRAM and Puresteel just worthless.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the deck has just bad cards after that.
But moving on to the sideboard, maybe we have some ways. I know we were talking about it a little bit. Well, this is not the
mana
sideboard.
base.
The mana base. Wait, you can't play any spells without a land, right? Okay, perfect. So we put this one in here.
So I mentioned the Mox Opal. That's just another mana source, but it gets picked up by Retract.
Yeah.
So it just repeatedly can tap for mana.
Yeah.
And then we have a couple of fetch lands, some fast lands to try and just get this out as quick as possible.
Absolutely. And then on the next.
And a couple of fetchable targets just for actually casting our spells. So we don't actually need any more than 2 or 3 mana at a time.
Yeah.
So because of Opal.
Right, absolutely.
So the deck actually only runs 14 lands.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you see a deck with Opal, it's usually something happening that's not pretty fair. Yeah. Okay, perfect. And then moving on to sideboard, which we tried to jump to a little bit earlier. We have a lot. What I noticed about your sideboard is a lot of 4-ups.
Yes.
You have a lot of
the deck has very distinct weaknesses, so the deck needs to be able to cover those in the other games.
What's Leyline there to kind of show up? What matches that going to
So targeted hand disruption, things like Thoughtseize, Inquisition, Collective Brutality.
So your Jund, your Abzan, your green-black.
Yep. It also hedges against burn, because sometimes burn can just bolt your SRAM, and now you have to draw into another, Puresteel effect.
Right. You do have 8 of them, but you don't. Without them, you can't get through your deck.
Right. You can't actually get the next one if you don't draw it. So that
kind of like a poor. Like when you're poor, you're really poor. When you're rich, like you have 1 or 2 of them, you can get to them really quickly. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
And silence. This is really interesting. I like seeing this on the. We saw this on coverage earlier. What do you bring silence in for?
So silence is for anyone who wants to try and stop you from casting spells. So we stop them from casting spells first. They either have to counter the silence, which most of the time means that they can't counter, say, a SRAM or a Retract, but then if they don't counter it, then they just can't counter that stuff anyway.
Yeah.
So
do you normally save silence like the turn that you're trying to go off to make sure that there's like no removal spell, or to see what's happening in their hand, or when do you normally fire it off?
I normally try and fire it off when I see about 3 mana open, because then they can't just double counter.
Yeah.
But they also, if I see 4 mana, they may try to Cryptic it.
Cryptic, I see.
And that's another card that can bounce in response.
Yeah, which can get you back to the same position, absolutely. And the Echoing Truth, what do you bring Echoing Truth in for?
I bring in Echoing Truth for Leyline of Sanctity, because with Storm I have to target my opponent.
Yes.
And then I also bring it in for things like Chalice of the Void, because if someone just puts that into play with 0 counters on it, I can't cast another spell.
Right, absolutely. So you need ways to interact with those cards, and Echoing Truth is what gives that to you. Yep. Absolutely. Moving forward, we have some other ones. Okay, perfect. So this is an interesting one, Paradoxical Outcome.
Yes.
We saw another Cheerios deck, and they were actually playing Mentor the board instead of the Paradoxical Outcomes. Why did you choose Paradoxical Outcome, and when do you bring it in?
So for a lot of the grindier matchups, the white and blue X heavy matchups where they're going to be countering your spells and spot removing your creatures, Paradoxical Outcome takes all of the equipment that you've drawn that are now worthless and gives you like a second chance. It's like an additional retract, but you actually get to draw when it resolves.
Yeah, you were saying that Paradoxical Outcome is kind of like having 5 retracts.
Yes.
Right, so that's an expensive retract, right?
Right, but the expensive part means that you get to draw it as soon as it resolves.
That's true.
I drew
Absolutely.
23 cards earlier today off of Paradoxical Outcome.
Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. Okay, perfect. And Lab Maniac. So we did talk about the decking aspect of it.
Yep.
When do you bring this guy in?
I bring this guy in against decks where targeting is going to be an issue. Things where maybe Storm just isn't going to get the job done. Abzan combo foremost.
Yeah.
Where I play is a huge part of the meta. So if they go off and gain, a million life, so you're never going to get the Storm count that high.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. There is a lot of decks, and there was a lot today that we saw as well. It's one of the more popular decks in Modern. Absolutely.
It's a very good deck. So.
Yeah. And what about this?
Favor of the Mighty was a card that I saw pretty spicy online.
Yeah, I have not. Yeah.
So what it does is takes advantage of the fact that Modern is a very fast format. People are playing usually 1 and 2 drop creatures into, heavier spells, and this allows us to utilize protection to stop removal spells on our Puresteels and our SRAMs.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
So for the most part, where I'm looking to go off turn 2 or turn 3, Puresteel and SRAM both being 2 converted mana cost are usually the highest converted mana cost, if not tied, in which case it says each creature.
Right,
so
absolutely.
Protects them either way.
Oh, perfect. That's actually, I didn't even think about that one. So kind of talking about that, all right, I lost my train of thought. I'm like, so I know you said that you didn't want to play against like heavy removal spell decks.
Yes.
What did you think was going to be here at this tournament when you?
So I was expecting a lot of burn. I did honestly expect a lot of Grixis, so that's why I specifically had that one in there.
Right, absolutely.
I wanted some kind of interaction with that. So, I mean, with the advent of Fatal Push, I thought since there was going to be a huge swing, we'd be seeing a lot more of that. Which
we are seeing in almost every single deck that sits on. If they have black, they're definitely playing some amount of Fatal Pushes. So you're definitely right on the money there. Okay, awesome. So how are you doing so far? We're in.
So far, I am unfortunately 1 and 3. Game 1 was due to a poor mistake on my part. Forgot to float some mana before casting a Puresteel, so it got removed in response.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
And the other 2 decks, because the deck runs only 14 lands, one of the losses was due to mull to 4. Don't see a land until turn 3.
That's something else I was going to ask you about the deck. How do you feel about the consistency of the deck? Do you feel that the deck is consistent? And when are you looking to win? Are you looking for a turn 3 win, turn 4 win all the time, or is that just some corner cases?
With the exception of one game, all of my wins have been on turn 2 or turn 3.
Okay.
So the deck is very fast, and it's very consistently fast when it does work. So for the most part, if you can't get that turn 2 or turn 3 win, and you have to try and play for the long game, every turn is exponentially harder to win after that.
Right, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Okay, perfect. So thank you so much. We'll check back in with you and see how you're doing. I know there are some other Cheerios players that are doing really well.
I have seen some.
Yes, absolutely. Check back in with you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much.
Bye.